So the next series we do is about politics, huh?
Oh, man. Okay, no TV today, so gotta remember where we left off. We've been talking about these specific groups that were around during the time of the intertestamental period. Right, specific groups of people. And we were talking about a number of these guys. If you had to say a group of people that were, well, all right, introductory question first. What is it, this problem of Hellenization, what does that mean?
Greek influence.
Yeah, Greek influence. And what's so bad about Greek influence into Jewish society? What do we know about the Greek influence?
They were very liberal, very open-minded about everything.
Very open, very adulterous, many different gods, many different ways of free thought, all kinds of liberality that was bad, yeah, for sure. So we have these various groups of Jewish people responding to this Greek influence into their culture. Whether they like it or not, it's there. Who would you describe as one of the larger, stricter groups of people that said, we are going to hold on to our Jewish heritage?
Pharisees?
The Pharisees, indeed. Pharisees would be the big one, the big group of people that were really strong. Now, what would be the other, not as big, but still sizable group of people that had a more liberal approach that said, well, let's just make kind of both of them work?
Sadducees.
The Sadducees. And why were the Sadducees? How do you remember the Sadducees were Sadducee? How do you remember that?
I didn't believe in resurrection.
They didn't believe in the resurrection. They didn't believe in an afterlife. Angels, demons, all the things associated with that, they didn't. So you're right, that's why you remember Sadducees or Sadducee. Now, we also mentioned a group of people that decided to take their own, almost a cult, if you will, their own group of people and just get out of there and run towards the Dead Sea and camp around there. They were so strict that they wouldn't even marry. So they died out. What was that group? Yeah, the Essenes. Yeah. And what is it? Why are the Essenes so helpful to us today? What did they give us?
They preserve the word of God.
They gave us the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is a huge old preservation of Old Testament scriptures that we've compared with the ones that we already have, and we found out, wow, they really protected God's word. So they did us a huge favor. So we're still trying to think about these groups, and again, it's always fun to talk about the Pharisees, because the Pharisees were that group that they were really, really good people. But they're still an example of how even the best of people can do the dumbest of things. And then you see the application of that in our world, right? If you want a doctor to verify some medical thing, you can find it. It doesn't matter what, I mean, it could be eating worms. And I bet you I could find a doctor somewhere that says this is healthy for you, right? But he's a doctor. Yeah, that doesn't necessarily matter. Sometimes you can be really smart, but, are really credentialed, but that doesn't mean your intelligence stays in a realm where it's actually smart. It just kind of veers off into wherever. And boy, academia, we talked about that some, right? These institutions that are teaching things. Yeah, a lot of really, really smart things have come out of Harvard and Yale, but also some very, very dumb things are coming out of there too, right? This is something that happens even among good, respected people. And unfortunately, the Pharisees are a good lesson for us because they're no different than the rest of the world. Even they are very well-meaning people who want to preserve their faith, which, there is no Christianity at this point. This is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is the God that we serve. And they had it as their mission in life to preserve him and what he says. That's a very, very noble thing. So, you guys know this, but let's review anyway. What was it that caused them? I shouldn't ask it that way. Where did these Pharisees go wrong? Because their intentions are very good, aren't they? Their intentions to preserve God's law are very good. Where would you say they got off?
And they started to put hedges around God's law.
Yeah, and what do we mean by a hedge around God's law?
Another law, their own rules.
Another rule
To protect that rule.
to protect the first rule, yes. Now, what's the problem with putting another rule to protect the first rule?
You gotta find one to protect the next one.
You're right, it's a man-made rule. A man-made rule is not God's rule. And that's something we have to remember. People have, just over time, it's very, very easy to just start elevating the rules of man and sinking the rules of God. And sometimes I think maybe literacy in Scripture is part of that. Have you ever had an experience where you were thinking about something that the Bible says, and then you realize later on that, oh, the Bible never actually said that? I love my grandfather when he admitted this to me. He said, I had a whole sermon worked out on yield not to temptation. Then he looked in his Bible and figured out, man, that's not there. There's no verse that says yield not to temptation. It sounds so biblical though, right? It sounds like it should be there, but it wasn't, It's easy for us to get tripped up and do that. So you can imagine when these guys started writing down these traditions and teaching them right beside the Torah and right beside the Tanakh, which would refer to the whole Old Testament, how people could just associate both in their mind, and before long, they're quoting other rabbis and their other views on this, and you've got a whole web of laws upon rules that you have to follow, and you're going to get confused. Wait, what did God say versus what did these guys say? And not only do we have that whole web, I tried to use my sloppy illustration, but if you have the Word of God that you're protecting, and then you draw these little hedges that people make around it, what happens when the hedges become too many? After a while, it's hard to remember where one stops and where the other goes. The entire thing could shift so much that sometimes to obey a hedge, you have to violate the law itself, because it was protecting a purpose of the law, but it forgot another one. Can you think of an example that Jesus gave where someone, a Pharisee perhaps, would violate the law to keep a tradition? Can you think of anything?
Washing.
Oh, yeah. They really got after Jesus that one time because he didn't wash his hands before entering. Was it a Gentile's home he was entering? But that wasn't a real cleansing. That was a ceremonial, wash off this Gentile filth, as far as I understand it. Yeah, that's a good one, where Jesus says, basically you could say, where's that in the Bible? It wasn't there. What were you saying? Prayer. Yeah, what about that?
Well, they would stand on the street corners.
Oh, yeah. Observing these specific hours, no matter where they are. Stop in traffic and pray if that's what you got to do. Did you say Corbin? What do you mean by Corbin?
So, if the son didn't, I kind of forgot honestly.
No, you're on the right track.
It had to do with
if a son
him
knew
having
he should
to
be
give
taking
money.
care of his father and mother.
That's what it is.
Yeah,
right?
but he didn't really want to do that.
So he just says it's for God's temple or something.
Yes, Corbin just means a gift dedicated to God. So he could say, oh, Mom, Dad, I love you so much and I want to take care of you, but I've dedicated my life savings to God. Corbin. Well, he dedicated it to God. Now, what is it that we happen to know? Not that makes it okay anyway. That is bad enough right there. But what else is wrong with this Corbin idea? If they dedicated it to God, well, we understand that actually they were allowed to use some of that money that they dedicated to God. They were actually allowed, and I don't remember, does anyone remember the specifics of this? They were allowed to use some of it for their own good until they died, or there's some way that they had access to that money, but they can't give it to anyone else because it's dedicated to God, see? I've budgeted this money. It is only to be used for weightlifting equipment in the Lord's gym, which is conveniently located at my house. I'm so sorry, Mom and Dad. I know you're dying of cancer and that the treatment can save you, but I've dedicated this to the Lord's gym. It's as dumb as that. And the Pharisees had kind of, in order to follow their traditions, Jesus said, you guys have many things like that, where in order to protect the law, you actually violate the law. Remember the other one too, it was on a Sabbath day. Remember Jesus healed somebody on the Sabbath day, and the religious people couldn't celebrate that, could they? What could they do about Jesus healing on the Sabbath day? What did they do when Jesus healed on a Sabbath day?
Got mad at him.
Jesus, there are 6 other days where you can heal people if you're going to go around performing miracles, which, by the way, how did you do that? That's weird. Anyway,
Yeah, right.
6 other days you can do this. This is the Sabbath, need I remind you. And you remember Jesus, what was Jesus' really smart response to this? He said, what about you guys?
Sabbath
Yeah, he does say the Sabbath was for man, not man for the Sabbath. He does teach that. Remember what else he says? Hey, one of you has an ox or a donkey, and that thing stumbles into a pit. Do you leave it there to die because it's the Sabbath day? No. They helped their animal out because they were allowed to. And so Jesus just uses some simple reasoning. If it's okay for animals, don't you think it's maybe okay for this person that Satan has kept bound for all these years? You know, all these man-made things. And they get really silly as time goes on. And it's fun to talk about. The one that Emily was just reminding me of, I think it was you, right? Were the offshoot of the Pharisees. A group of them were referred to as the bruised and bleeding Pharisees. You guys know what these are, right? What was this group of, the specific group of Pharisees called the bruised and bleeding Pharisees? Why were they called that? Does any of you remember?
Close their eyes. And
Why would they close their
or
eyes?
whatever. If they saw a girl or something.
If a woman was coming by, they would close their eyes because they were strict. They were not going to have any appearance of adultery. So they would close their eyes and then inadvertently walk into walls, trip, fall down, hurt themselves, and they were known as the bruised and bleeding Pharisees. Okay, you know? So we can see where this goes. Some of the crazy, ridiculous things that those guys had to, not had to, but chose to follow. And it's a reminder for us, because I see it in the modern day church, and you guys see it in ministry, or you will if you haven't already, that a lot of churches mean really well, but I'm telling you, if you walk up and you accidentally move that, well, I guess you would do it accidentally, but if you move a podium somewhere, you take somebody's seat, you do something that you weren't supposed to do, that nobody told you, you see how they react. They won't like it. They won't like you. And you think, what? I thought we were worshiping the same God. I thought we were all in this together. We are, but over time it is very easy to get used to things and with good intentions start adding to God's law. And,
Can I give you an example?
okay.
One of my old friends I went to Bible college with years ago was posting on Facebook how he hates the modern Christian music, and he used a 4-letter word while describing it. And I'm thinking, okay, you stand for hymns, blankety blank. You know? I just thought,
Wow.
yeah.
Boy, that's good. That's not good. It's not good, but it's good. Yeah. Wow, that is a good example. You know, so well-meaning. And that's one of, I don't know why sometimes I think about these things, but I try to be sensitive to the groups out there that hate Christians, even though they're gonna hate Christians. I get that. Like, you know, anyone that we believe is doing the wrong thing, and we're not afraid to say what God truly says, we're not going to be liked very much for that. However, some of those groups do sincerely and truly have a point at times. I think of the homosexual group, for one. They're involved in a sinful activity and a sinful lifestyle that they need to obviously repent of, for sure. God makes that clear. And we want to reach out to them. But a lot of churches, because let's face it, we don't like that one. It's gross. You know, we really don't like it. We treat that a certain way, but when it comes to divorce, when it comes to an affair, when it comes to some of these other things, we don't treat that the same way as this particular sin. And why is that? Well, I think we're more grossed out by this particular sin. But in God's eyes, aren't these all gross sins? Aren't they all awful things? You know what God says? You're going to be studying Malachi. What's that famous passage in Malachi that God says about divorce? I hate divorce. Which I think it's fair to say we all hate it. I think even people that have been involved in it still hate it. The breaking of a covenant, that was just not meant to be. It's hurtful. So I think people have a point there, and so we want to be fair on all accounts. We want to stand on God's word everywhere it is. Don't find the legal loopholes that these Pharisees did. Now, the Sadducees. We discussed them. I believe we discussed the Essenes already. So I'm going to skip to another group of people that you may have heard of before. This group is called the Zealots. When you hear the word zealot, does it sound a bit like an English word to you? Does it kind of make you think of the word zealous? I don't know. What is it? What is being zealous? What is zealous?
Don't know.
Yeah, all over this. What was it? Paul says that he was zealous for the law. You know, and Paul's that kind of guy. He wasn't passive. He's aggressive. That's probably a good way to view these guys. These people who were zealots. They appear earlier in the time of Rome, when Rome ruled Palestine. According to Josephus, he says that it was that group formed around AD 6, when a Jew and Pharisee group rebelled against Rome. So I'm not sure exactly where they came from. But who were they? They were the kind of Jews that said, we're going to rebel and we're going to overthrow Rome. We're going to overthrow this wicked, wicked nation, and we're going to win. So what was their platform? Their platform would be violence. They wanted the violent overthrow of the Roman government and the Roman Empire. So if that's what they're looking for, how do you think they felt when tax time came? We're God's chosen people, and we should fight for that. And then Rome comes in, it's time to collect taxes. Now, who did Rome oftentimes use to collect taxes? Jewish people. Why would Jewish people be willing to collect taxes for Rome? You make money. You make money. So how do you think tax collectors were viewed in Jesus' day? Sellouts. Sellouts. The people that only care about money. Not only are they cheaters, we know they could ask for more money or demand more money and get it and make it that way. That's true. Even if they weren't doing that, they have, to a lot of Jews, they've sided with the enemy. They're the ones that are taking our money and giving it to the enemy. And how are you, you claim you're just looking out for your family or whatever. How is it, Zacchaeus, Matthew, how is it that you can truly be looking out for your family's best interest while stealing your chosen, God's nation's money and giving it to a pagan nation? How can you truly be doing that? You're robbing us of what we have so that we'll be helpless to overthrow this government someday. And God has prophesied that that should happen when our Messiah comes. See the kind of the way they'd be thinking, They wanted that overthrown, and they were thinking that that's how God was going to do it. He's going to use military power. Now, this group of people would refuse to pay taxes. They just wouldn't do it. Obviously not a very popular group of people, but do we know of anyone in the New Testament that was referred to as a zealot?
Simon.
Simon the Zealot, yeah. Simon the Zealot. So it was a common enough belief in that day, in Jesus' day, yeah. Now, they may have been an offshoot of Pharisees, but according to the teacher I was studying this under, it wasn't for certain. Don't know for sure if they're an offshoot of Pharisees or not. May well have been. They would acknowledge, anyone that acknowledged any kind of loyalty to Caesar would be committing a terrible sin to them. Anyone that said they're loyal to Caesar at all would be sinful. And the invasion of AD 70 that took place, probably there was a lot of them involved in that, their kind of attitude and everything. Now, think about this, because I think you guys understand this. Obviously, Christians in the early days, when it came to proclaiming, a pinch of incense and saying Caesar is Lord, Christians in the beginning wouldn't do that, right? Why wouldn't Christians do that? It's pretty simple.
They didn't view Caesar as God.
Caesar was not Lord, and they were not even going to say with their lips something that is not true. They were not going to dishonor God, right? So that sounds like a good thing. So what's wrong with these zealots saying that we should have zero loyalty whatsoever to the Roman government? I mean, if you think about it, it would seem like they have a bit of a point, right? They have a right to this territory, and Rome's got the power. It's just not really fair that we're stuck where we are. If you only think of it that way, you might say, I guess that kind of makes sense. But what do we know in light of what Paul says in the New Testament? I'm thinking of Romans chapter 13, and there are other passages.
Doesn't it say obey the law of the land?
It does, doesn't it? It says be subject to the governing authorities, and that God has delegated the sword to them. And what's amazing to me is not that he says that so much, but it's the government that was in charge when Paul says that in Romans 13. Who was that government? It was the government of Rome. And we know these guys, they're awful guys. But yet they still had the position, the authority, and God's going to hold them accountable for how they use that position, that's for sure. But that is one of those spheres of authority that is God ordained. So even though I think these zealots were probably well-meaning, it's probably a little questionable, perhaps, some of their tactics on this. Sometimes you may not like your government. Now, granted, I'm not saying that, therefore, you should never change your government, or that should never. No, there probably is a time or a place for that. But I bet you it'd be shocking. The whole Christian attitude really would smack against a lot of what these Jews thought, because they were so national. That is the way they viewed themselves. And so the only way you make that grow is you conquer. Well, not the only, but that's one of the main ways you do it. You fight and you conquer. And so it's just a really different kind of war that Jesus comes and wages, and I think you guys know that. Any questions on that or clarification for these zealots, these zealous people?
What was the year? Was it
That they were formed? The Josephus says 6 AD.
80?
86,
86
yeah. Number 6.
Oh,
AD,
6.
6 years after
Oh.
Jesus,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what Josephus says. I'm not sure if that's actually factual or not. Not everything he says is factual, but that's what he records for us. Now, there's another group that is important to be aware of, and I bet you've heard of them too, the Herodians. So here, just take one of these and pass it down. This is a little chart. Let me take one and pass it down for me. Of the Herods. And when you get the chart, you're going to understand why you need a chart for the Herods. Because what is it we know? Here, I'll take this. Let's take a look at these guys. This family was really something else. Let's see how many Herods can we find on this list. We have Herod the Great, and we come under him, and we see all the different names of family there. Then you come down to that third line, you have Herod Antipas, but you also have Herod Philip, and you have another Herod Philip on the right side. Now, you look underneath these guys, and Herod has Herodias. I really love that name. Herod Philip also has Herodias, but the other Herod Philip doesn't. Now you talk about confusing. Try explaining this without a chart. Good luck. Then you go down a little bit further, the fourth line there, and you see through the line of Aristobulus and Bernice, you go on down to another Aristobulus, and then you have Herod Agrippa the first. And then you have Bernice and Herod Agrippa the second. Not to be confused with Herod Agrippa the first's relative over here, Herodias, who had another Herod Philip on the right-hand side. And then you go on the left, and you have another Herod, another Aristobulus. I mean, I'm telling you what, it gets very, very confusing. And you can see the mess that this family caused. Now, what was it? Was it Jeff Foxworthy that says, you might be a redneck if your family tree was like a snake? Whatever. But to be truthful, this family had a lot of incest inside the family. There was incestuous marriage, incestuous relationships. Do you know someone in the early days of the Gospels that was speaking out at Herod saying, you shouldn't have that person as a wife? You're related. Remember who was speaking out to Herod? Ultimately got his head chopped off? John the Baptist. John the Baptist was speaking up. Incest was a part of this family and sharing of these names. As a matter of fact, the term Herod, I think you could even make an argument that it's almost a title. It's almost like a title to them because of how often it was thrown around and used. So a chart like this, I believe, is very helpful to have because, especially if you don't realize it and you're reading through Acts and you're reading about Paul and Herod Agrippa and stuff, you just need to know you are not reading the same Herod that we dealt back, in the days of John the Baptist or in several other instances. You're dealing with a number of different people in this very corrupt family. So, the Herodians. Who are the Herodians? Well, in order to know that, I guess we need to know who Herod is. What was the Herod family? What were they in charge of? What did they do? Yeah, they were kind of the rulers of that area under the thumb of Rome, and Rome was the big superpower behind him. But Herod and his family in the days of Jesus was actually an Edomite, of Edomite descent. But the Romans took him and said, you're going to be the ruler of this region. And so he did the job. So obviously you can imagine Jews that know their scripture, they wouldn't like this family very much. Not at all. But there were some that we refer to as Herodians. These people were influential Jews that supported both Rome and Herod. The Herodians, they would be faithful to Herod and to Rome. I have a reference here for Matthew 22:16, and I'm not sure why it's there. If somebody wants to look up Matthew 22:16, you can tell me if that reference makes any sense or if it's just a random piece of scribbling here. That would be, what does Matthew 22:16 say?
They sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. Teacher, they said, we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are.
Yes. Can you read the verse right before that? Who is it sending their disciples? Who does it say?
The Pharisees.
The Pharisees sent their disciples with the Herodians.
And the next verse after it is the question they asked.
Yeah, what was the question they asked?
Pay taxes.
Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? That's the... Isn't that interesting? That this classic case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend mentality. Pharisees and Herodians, you can figure this out, right? You've seen enough already. Those two would not get along at all. These people wanted to adhere strictly to the law of God and not let it go away. And these people were Jews that wanted Herod the Edomite and all of Rome to just come in and take him over. But when it comes to Jesus, all of a sudden, we'll get together and we'll stump them together. Isn't that fascinating? That tells you how scared they were, how hateful they were, how bothered they were by Jesus coming. And then they asked the question about taxes. What a firestorm that would be. And Jesus' answer, what was his answer? Yeah, hey, if it's Caesar's, give it to him. If it's God's, give it to him. He knew exactly what they were up to. And, I mean, you can probably see them coming. And with those two groups together, you know, something is up. Something is up. So we have the Herodians here. Something interesting that I learned, these people would be heavily involved in politics. The Edomites, it is suggested, and I was taught this, so I don't know how to verify it myself, but that they, in the region of Edom, had a lot of rocks and kind of hills and things there. It was very hard to attack and to take over, and that was one of the reasons why they served as a safety deposit box for a lot of people. That they were kind of a, deposit some of your money here and we'll keep it safe for you group. They kind of became known to function as a bank in ancient days. That's the Edomites. And all the Herods, they're Edomites. So that's a little bit about the Herodians. Next group of people we want to get at before we run out of time, is this group. Scribes. The scribes. Now, a lot of times you read about the scribes with other people in the New Testament. They're coming up to Jesus. Who's with the scribes a lot of times when you read about them?
Pharisees.
Yeah, Pharisees and scribes, teachers of the law. Yeah, a lot of times they go together. This group of people, the scribes, would probably not be considered a religious group or a political group, but more so a professional group, a professional one. It's the word that oftentimes could be translated a teacher or a lawyer in Scripture. So someone that probably is very, very smart, ready to stump you on the technicalities, and they knew it. They were authoritative interpreters of the law. They were, it almost makes it seem like the Google of their day based on God's law. You come over to them, let's ask the scribe, what does God mean? Well, this is exactly what God says. They knew it, and they knew it very, very well. So they were the interpreters of the law. And when I say law, not just written law, the oral law too. So you can see how much dedication it would take to become a scribe. You would have to know a lot. So when you see all these scribes coming up with Jesus, I guess it's not too far off to think, okay, I'm going to bring my hotshot lawyer team and I'm going to ask this guy some tax questions. You know what I mean? It's not that much different. They really wanted to stump Jesus. And they had the best people on their side, and the best people couldn't do it, and he would know all the loopholes and everything. So it's just very interesting. That's the group of people known as the scribes. There's one last group that I want to talk about before we quit today. And this is just kind of an interesting group. Let me see if I can spell it right. Okay. S-I-C-A-R-I-I. The Sakari people. These are referred to as the dagger people. The dagger people. Assassins. Basically, assassins. And they literally would hide daggers underneath their clothing, right? And they did this so if they came across any Herodians or any Jews faithful to Rome, they'd kill them. They were, some think that they were really closely aligned with the Zealots, which stands to reason, makes sense, someone that zealous. Really don't know a whole lot about them, but you can see why, right? They're kind of an underground terrorist organization of their day. But they're the, I don't want to make too many wrong references here, but they were serious about stopping anyone from being sympathizers with Rome or Herod or anything that wasn't true Jewish
They're
custom.
Jewish people.
Jewish people that would kill, that would secretly go around and they would kill when they could too. So the dagger people, the Sakari, the assassins. Any questions on any of this so far?
Never heard of them.
Yeah, I can't say I had. I mean, I may have heard the name, but there are a lot of these things, and I hope you find some of this helpful because a lot of this stuff, like, yeah, I've heard that name before, yeah, I've heard that name before, but there are parts about them that can't say I've heard that, didn't realize that about them. There's a whole lot of things. I think it helps to get underneath some of the, get inside of the minds of some of these people to see why they do what they do, and then understand when they come to Jesus how, one person asked a question. If someone, sorry, the divorce is on my mind, don't know why. I'm not thinking about it.
Right.
But if someone asks a question about divorce and you walk in, to the person that they're asking the question to, it may just be, oh, okay, you're wanting to know what's right or wrong about a divorce. But if I walk in and see that person and I know they are married to someone with this exact same issue and they're asking, is it okay to divorce? You see the difference? To me, that's not just a question. Like, you have a motive. You have a whole thing you're trying to accomplish here. There's more than just a surface level question. So I hope a lot of the things that you read when you're reading your New Testament again, and you see, oh, Pharisees and Herodians walk up to Jesus and ask him, hey, is it right to pay taxes to Caesar? The Sadducees walk up to Jesus and say, hey, in the resurrection, that one guy that had all these different women, who's he going to be married to? I hope it helps open up your mind a little bit to realize, whoa, I know exactly why they're asking. They are trying to stump him and prove that their religious viewpoint is right. And Jesus shows time and time again, you guys are wrong. You guys are wrong.
One of the things I think that ties in with this too, when Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD, the Jews themselves killed more Jews than the Romans did because there was so much infighting between all these different sects and groups.
Wow, boy, that is a very good point. And now we have a better idea of why.
Yeah.
Chaos. Boy, yeah, that's another, I'm glad you brought that up. That's another thing I had heard, but it just sounds too unbelievable, right? Jews killing Jews, yep. Part of the
That'd be like Muslims killing Muslims.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right, any other comments or thoughts? Yeah.
Is there any chapters specific for the Sicarii or anything specific for them?
I don't know of anything specific in the Bible. I'm sure in secular history, I wouldn't be surprised if Josephus has something to say about them, but I don't know. Are you familiar with any? Is anyone here familiar with anything? Google. Yeah. I honestly don't know. I just heard about it from him, so I don't know what his source is on that. Yeah.
This is maybe, hopefully not too far off topic. Maybe I could just look it up on Google or whatever, but do you know any historians that are like Josephus that weren't Christians and they tell us history about Jewish people and these kind of people, like that time?
Yeah.
Secular historians? Do you know
Yeah.
others that are Josephus?
We're going to talk more about Josephus later. You know some, right? What are some that you would? Because I jumble all mine up. They're all different places, but there are a number
Well,
of
Philo
sources.
is a good source, but he's Jewish. But there's some real famous Roman historians of the
Really?
first century. Can't remember their names right now. But
I need to look those up. I was having someone ask me about it.
there's some Greek historians too, but the Romans were real big on recording their history.
Yeah. Which, when we get to talking a little bit about Josephus, that's who he worked with. He worked with the Romans. Cool. Let's pray. God, thank you for your protection that you've given us. We've got a difficult, at times, political climate that we're living in, and we're trying to walk on eggshells sometimes, trying to reach this world without scaring them away, but yet at the same time we don't ever want to back away from what you told us. But God, I just want to thank you for the reminder that this isn't something new, and as a matter of fact, the way we're going about it may not be nearly as bad as how other followers of you had to deal with the political climates of their days. So help us not to lose heart. Help us to remember that you've been working and you continue to work through all the messes that mankind creates. And when I say mankind, I mean even the Christian mankind too, that means well, but starts to change or add to your word. God, continue to clean up our messes as we get closer to your word, understand it better, and just really try to obey it instead of redefining it in some other way other than what you wanted. So thank you for helping us to do that, and I just pray for more success in that as we continue to meditate and think about the truth that you've given us. Thank you for the encouragement that everyone here brings to me and that we can bring to each other. And God, I pray that this encouragement and this hope would be visible to other people who really don't know you yet, but I pray that they're intrigued. And it's in your Son's name I pray.
Thank you.
Thank you, Seth.